Welcome to another rapid fire development tutorial. Today we're going to be covering Spring Initializr, a tool I regularly use to set up my Spring Boot applications, and it makes it a lot easier and faster to get your project up and running. Spring Initializr can be used in three ways, either going to the website, start.spring.io. The second option is downloading the code because it's an open source project. You can download the Spring Initializr code and run it locally on your machine or on a server in your environment. And the third option that not many people know about is I use IntelliJ, and it's built into the IDE. You can either select to use the public start.spring.io initializer, or you can have a custom one that's hosted in your own environment. It follows the same process of configuring your application and adding your dependencies. Going back to the website, basically what you can do is select which type of project you're going to be running, whether you'll be running a Maven or Gradle project, which language would you be running, Java, Kotlin, or Groovy, the Spring Boot version. Currently defaults to the latest stable Spring Boot version for production ready. But you can also select something that's going to up and coming if you want to test new features. Your project metadata, such as your group, your artifact name, your description, and your package name. This is relatively important because when you download the application that it generates, it uses this package name as your base package for the application. If you change your group, um, it actually changes the package name on the bottom. Also, if you change your artifact name, which is also important because when you generate your application, when you build it, it'll use the artifact name to actually build the file for the package file that's built. Um, you can choose the different type of packaging. You can either use a jar or a WAR file, and you can choose the version of Java you want to use for Spring Boot. On the right-hand side, you can add your dependencies. When you click on the Add Dependency button, it brings up a list of dependencies that you can use. I'll briefly go over a few, but if you want to learn more, go ahead and go onto the website and look at the list because it's quite a long list of dependencies. The main ones that I normally use is the Spring Boot Dev tool, which makes it a lot easier to, when you're making code changes, that it reloads really fast and just helps with development in general. A Lombok, which removes your boilerplate code I use for majority of my projects as well. It covers multiple sections like web, all the libraries for web in Spring Boot, template engines that use for Spring MVC, security libraries, SQL libraries, NoSQL libraries, messaging libraries, I/O, ops, observability, testing, Spring Cloud, Spring Cloud security. Um, there's so many different types of libraries. So yeah, take your time. You can go and have a look at it. Don't let this confuse you or make it complicated. It's not really. You normally select what you're going to be used for your application. So if we set up an application that we're going to use, for instance, we're going to do a MongoDB application, what I would do primarily is select add my dev tool, which is Lombok and Spring Boot dev tools, and then I would add my RESTful Spring Web to add my RESTful services, and I would add MongoDB, Spring Data MongoDB. Basically, that's all I need to get up and running. There's no other tools or libraries I would use. With this, I can actually set up a new MongoDB application, connecting to MongoDB and exposing it via RESTful services with these libraries. I don't necessarily even need Spring Boot DevTools and Lombok. I would just need these two libraries to get that project up and running. So as you go on and you learn more around Spring Boot, you'll be using more of these libraries if you want to add in additional security to your application. You can add in Spring Security, or if you're using OAuth 2 as a client, you can actually set that up as well. So yeah, that's basically what you would use in dependencies. On the bottom of Spring Initializr, you have your generate button, which will generate a zip file of the application. You have your explore button, which actually generates your project and you can actually explore it on the website itself. You can see it's set up with the POM file with all the dependencies you included, which was Spring Data MongoDB and the Spring Web starter web that we included. And then it also included Lombok and the dev tools that I added in. Under the source folder, that's all that's changed on the basic Maven project. That's all they added into the POM, and the properties that you set in on your metadata would be put into the description, the name, and so on of your project. gets added into your POM file. Under the source folder, it sets up your package. You can see the com.test.test, which was the package name we used. And in that package, that base package, it set up a test application file, which is your starter for your application. So it's your main method for Java application. As you know, this will run on startup and will kick off your Spring application. On the top, it uses an annotation, which is Spring Boot application, so that when it runs, it knows that it is a Spring Boot application. And also it adds in a application.property files. This you would use to set up new properties inside of your application. And it creates a test package as well with a basic test to test that your application can run. And it created 2 additional folders, which was a static and template folders under resource. That's because we included Spring Web, and these are the folders you would use to add in your different web pages if you're going to be using Spring MVC to display your HTML pages. So you can use these 2 folders to do that. It's also handy to, if you have error pages and so on, you add them into here so that if somebody goes to your URL and enters something incorrectly, it'll show up with that page instead of a generic static page that they have built into Spring Boot. Basically, that's effectively the application that will be generated. You can then download that application and open it up in your IDE of choice. Let's quickly download it now. You can see it's downloaded as a zip file. You can quickly open that zip file, or quickly open up the project in IntelliJ. I normally use my command line to do this, just so it's easier for me, but you can actually open it up with IntelliJ as well if you're using IntelliJ, sorry. I did not copy the project into my workspace. Let me copy this project into my workspace quickly. That's done. So now if I open up test, I'm in the folder ls, you can see the POM file there. I'll just use the idea command POM to open it up. Cool, it opened up the project for us, and the structure of the project is exactly the same as I showed you on the web. And you can go in. At this point, what I normally do is I use the application properties, I change it to a YML file because you can either use YML or the properties. It also has autocomplete for your properties, so if you control space, you can enter Mongo and it'll bring up all your different properties that you have available inside of Spring Boot. And yeah, I mean, the application can be started up as well if you have MongoDB running, because I included MongoDB in this application. It failed because MongoDB is not running. We can start that up quickly so that we can show the application can start up. Give me a second. Cool. Cool, and start it up, and it's accessing local port 8080. The main difference, you would notice that I didn't have to configure it to tell it where MongoDB is, because Spring Boot, as you may know, auto configures everything for you with default properties. So by default, it sets MongoDB to localhost and the standard port, which I have running. So it knew how to connect to it, and it connected to it directly. If I want to change that, I can easily go and change one of the MongoDB, the port in the host and where I want it to be and what the database name is for this application. So yeah, I mean, that's basically Spring Initializr. I hope that y'all would start playing around with it, get some applications going with it. It's a really great tool. And yeah, happy developing. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.